Introduce yourself.
All right. My name is Jack Walls. That is my nickname. My real name is Henry M. Walls. I was a sergeant first class in the United States Army. I was drafted March 18th, 1943. Went to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, and from Jefferson Barracks, Missouri to Fort Hahn, California. That's across from March Field and pretty close to where they had the 500 race. Can't think of the name in California.
Indianapolis 500?
No, it's not the Indianapolis, it's a California race. But I can't remember the name, I will after a while. But anyway, I went from there to Camp Carson, Colorado, which is an Air Force base. Now, at that time, it was partly infantry and mule pack. And we maneuvered against a mule pack outfit. In fact, we climbed Mike Pike's Peak with go-karts and machine guns on the go-karts. There's two men to a go-kart with a, we carried our rifles and field packs with us naturally, and maneuvered against the mules. From there we went to Fort Benning, Georgia. In Fort Benning, Georgia, we were in a machine gun crew. We're supposed to protect the artillery when they had to retreat, while we were supposed to protect the guns until they could get the guns out way. After that, I went to, we went on a firing range in California, up around the desert, and fired anti-aircraft guns. We had sleeves that they pull behind the planes and that we'd shoot at, and each battery had a different colored tracer bullets, whichever fifth tracer bullet in a machine gun is a tracer. You could have, most of them are red, but then each company had their own color. And that way they could tell which company was doing the firing, which one hit the sleeve that they were pulling. A sleeve is just a big long target that they pull behind the planes while we shot at them for practice. We ran into, after that we went down to Texas, and we did another firing range down there at Waco, Texas, and in our aircraft school. We fired at drone planes down there, and whenever you hit one of these planes, a parachute came out and let the plane down, and they'd repair it and send it back up. Well, it didn't work too long because the boys got to shooting the planes down, and they couldn't repair them, so they put us to shooting balloons, which worked out pretty good. But to make a long story short, after various other camps, why, I ended up in Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. That's a jumping off point for the European Theater of Operations. We got on a battleship at Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and I might add that I was sick as a horse. I had the flu. If I reported it to my company commander, why, I couldn't have got to go over with my outfit. They would have left me there, but I didn't want to do that, so I got on the ship sick. Went to bed. For the next 2 days, I stayed in bed. Whenever I got up on the third day, everybody was seasick. They were throwing up everywhere. And but I didn't get sick. I'd already been sick. I guess I'd had enough sickness. And
now, what outfit were you with?
I was with the 71st Infantry Division. I was with the 571st Signal Company, but it was the 71st Infantry Division. There was a convoy of approximately 80 ships that we went over with. Went over in a small ship, probably had 2,000 men on it, something like that. We could only get 2 meals a day. We got breakfast at about 9 o'clock in the morning and supper about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and this was it. And not too much of that. So it took us 14 days. And at the end of 14 days, we were pretty hungry. So whenever we landed at Le Havre, France, which had been taken several months before we landed, And we made camp there for about a week. And we camped out in an old farmer's field that land had probably been farmed for 1,000 years, so it wasn't a rock anywhere to be found. It was raining, and whenever we put up our tents, you couldn't make a tent peg stay down. You put down your bunk, they had those cross bunks, and your bunk would be in the mud the next morning because the legs just go down in the mud. So the captain said, go out and get some rocks. So we went down in the ditches, and first one place another, gathered up rocks and put in the company streets, and the next thing you know, this Frenchman was here raising all kinds of cane. He didn't want no rocks in his field. So we had to get an interpreter to tell him that we'd pay him for it. Eventually, Uncle Sam paid for all the damage they did anywhere. From there, we went to the border of France and Germany, of a little town called Bitche, France. There was a big castle on this, like you see in the movies, and the Germans had occupied this all of the winter of 43 and 44. The 100th Division would try to take it, and then they'd get drove back. And it was on a mountain, and it was about a mile or so, just clear firing field, that they'd drive the troops back down, and they'd try to come up it again, but they couldn't make it. So when our outfit got there, that was our first action. One of the infantry, we had 3 infantry divisions, the 5th, the 14th, and the 66th. I believe it was the 66th Infantry Division, backed by the 5th and the 14th, that helped take this place for the last time in Christmas of 44. From there we went through France. Of course, we went through the Maginot Line. This is where the French all had their guns pointed toward Germany, and when Germany invaded them, well, they just walked around it, so they didn't do them any good. We went across Germany. We joined, we were attached to Patton's 3rd Army. And I had been in a Signal Corps company, where our job was to keep communications between Patton's tanks and our infantry divisions. We had the 71st Infantry Division, and we fought alongside the 89th Division and the 101st Airborne Division. We had to go through the Siegfried Line, which was in Germany, which was a pillbox between Germany, and keep us from invading Germany. And they just took tanks and shot them and tore them up. And we got through that. We crossed the Rhine River on a pontoon bridge in the middle of the night. We went.
No, go ahead.
We went from there. After we crossed the Rhine River, we went into central Germany. We got a battle star for the Rhine River and one for central Germany. Well, we started toward Berlin, but for some odd reason, the powers that be says, no, we'll let the Russians take Berlin. So we went to Austria. So we went all the way up to Berchtesgaden in Austria and met the Russians. On May the 8th, 1945, I was riding on a truck up toward the front when the boys came back saying the war was over with. We were about a mile from Berchtesgaden. And I don't know, I just couldn't hardly believe it for a minute or two, but you know, it was one of those things that it kind of happened, and I was happy to see the war over with, believe me.
Did you have enough points to come home?
No, I had to stay another year and a half after the war was over with. I didn't have enough points because not having any dependents, while each dependent was worth 12 points, you could be in a short time and still have enough points to get out. But I didn't. We stayed in Austria about 3 months, And after that, we came back down into Germany in a town called Augsburg, Germany. And we stayed there for, about 6 months. And then I had enough points to come home. Well, whenever we was home, here's an odd thing. At Dachau, they had all these Russian prisoners that tried to commit suicide. Well, we had a camp that we had to go into and take the Russian prisoners out. According to this Potsdam Agreement, any Russians that were captured by us that had fought with the Germans had to be sent back to Russia. Well, in this camp that we went into, there was 1,800 or something like that of them. And we went in there about 4 o'clock in the morning, cut through the fence, run them all out of their barracks in their night clothes, took them back in and searched them to make sure that they didn't have any guns or knives or anything like that that they could kill themselves with. Because at the other camp, they didn't do that. They just went in and got them. And they just run their head through the window. They committed suicide, cut their wrists, and first one thing another. Didn't get too many of them out because they didn't want to go back to Russia, because they knew in their hearts that when they went back to Russia that there was either the salt mines or the firing squad. We were lucky.
They were prisoners? Just because they were prisoners?
No, because they had fought with the Germans. And of course, whenever we captured them, they were in the barracks. And but we went in and let them back in, searched all of them. They'd always ask you, said, what are you going to do with us? And I never did have the heart to tell them they was going back to Russia. I told them, I said, they're just taking you to another camp. But they took them down and put them on a train and sent them back to Russia, I'm sure. I never heard of them again. One thing I forgot to mention, I'll have to backtrack just a little bit. When we got up pretty close to Berchtesgaden, there was a Jewish prisoner camp up there where they take these Jewish people, and you hear about the Holocaust and all of this. And there was about 2,000 or 3,000 in this one camp. And the Germans had left them as soon as we got near. And in the back of this camp, there was probably 300 or 400 people that had starved to death with nothing but skull and just bones. They had them all stacked up, ready to put in a trench and cover up whenever we liberated it. Well, we didn't exactly know what was going on when we first went up there, and we let some of them get out. Well, there was some boxcars downtown. I think it was in Linz, Austria. And they got in them and they ate too much, and of course they died from overeating. And we tried to contain them and get them back in camp where we could feed them right, so that they wouldn't founder themselves. Then anyway, getting back going down the line, where I left for the United States in I suspect the 1st of April, 46. I got discharged at Jefferson Barracks on April the 9th, 1946. 3 years and 22 days. About half in the United States, about half in Germany. I don't know whether you could say fortunately or unfortunately. I was a staff sergeant whenever I got out, and they told me, said, now, you stay in the reserves, and of course you're going to be eligible to have to come back within 10 years anyway, if there's an emergency. So why don't you sign up for the reserves? I said, okay. So I signed up for 3 years. That was 46 to 49. 49, they come along and called me into signing up again for another 3 years, which would made it 52. Guess what? 1950, I got a letter from Uncle Sam, says, we want you again. So they called me back during this Korean War, sent me to Fort Riley, Kansas, gave us our uniforms, and I stayed there about a month, I guess, and then I came back down to Fort Leonard Wood. That was the 8th Armored Division at that time, and but we, on our side of the camp, we trained combat engineers. On the other side of the camp, the other half of the camp, they trained infantry. Well, they took the best men out of the infantry and they sent them over to combat engineers. So I was fortunate that I didn't go anywhere. I just stayed at Fort Leonard Wood. In 1951, they set a directive to the commanders that the people in active reserve that they had called up was to be released, because all their non-commissioned officers were all in the inactive reserve. So whenever we went in, whenever you looked around, everybody was a non-commissioned officer, and this is what they needed: somebody to train the recruits to go to Vietnam. I meant to Korea. So that I got out in October 13th, 1951. And that was about the end of my Army career. 52, my time was up, so I didn't re-enlist again.
Were you around the Battle of Bulge?
No, we didn't go that way. That's the reason we went to Austria. We went the other direction.
Did you go to the Eagle's Nest in Austria?
I never did go up to see it. I wasn't that interested in it, really. Everybody wanted to go up there, and in hindsight, I would have, but I didn't. You know, I just had too many other things on my mind.
You're in the Signal Corps, and you had something to do with communications. How'd that work?
My outfit had to do communications, but I personally did not. I fitted in anywhere. I could go to any division, anywhere, anytime. Guess what my job was? I was a mess sergeant. I seen that the troops got fed.
And how'd you go about that? Do you remember any of the details?
Oh, man. You know, we had, after we got in Germany and France, we didn't do any cooking. Now, this is kind of funny because we had canned rations. And having canned rations was meat and beans, vegetable stew, and hash. This was your 3 meals, and then there was a can of hard biscuits with each one of them. And so all we did was throw them 10 cans of water and heat them up. Every man had a little can opener to open these cans with. But most of our time was spent on guard duty, believe it or not, while the troops were back taking it easy. Now, these boys that you talk about in the Signal Corps, they laid wire. They worked almost day and night keeping communications. And whenever they'd come in tired, well, we'd have something hot for them to eat, or whatever we could manage. Once in a great while, we'd get enough food together to have a regular meal, but very seldom until the war was over with, just to eat out 10 cans.
What was your living condition like there?
Well, in France, the people in France would let us sleep in the barns if we wanted to, or places like that. But once we got into Germany, we'd just go down the street, and they'd send a non-commissioned officer down there, and they'd say, we're going to take over this building for the next 24 hours or whatever. Everybody out. And we'll give it back to you as soon as we're done with it. And we'd sleep in the buildings. We had it better in Germany as far as living conditions. We didn't have to sleep outside. We slept inside. And of course, we'd leave it just like we found it.
Now, in Germany, what division were you with? Or were you with the division? Or
I was with the 71st Infantry Division, but we had our company was the 571st Signal Company.
So were you attached to the division?
We were attached to the 3rd Army.
To the 3rd Army. To
the 3rd Army. The entire division was attached to the 3rd Army. We followed those tanks all the way across Germany, and we didn't stop, just maybe a day, 2 days at the most, to let, ammunition and... See, we had 3 infantry regiments that fought with these tanks, the 4th and the 5th and the 66th Infantry Regiments. In fact, whenever we got in Austria, we fired the last shots that were fired in World War II. Our division did, one of the infantry regiments.
You said you also were around the
101st Airborne. Yeah, they was the one that took Berchtesgaden. They were in that area. The 89th Division was on the opposite side of us.
What do you have to do with the 101st? They were just there?
They well, never. Personally never seen them very much. It was, you know, it was just different outfits, and we had a lot of people with us. There's a lot of men in the division. There's around 70,000 men you're talking about, you know, in a division. And you know, I've had some comrades from here in Potosi that was within 2 miles of me. Never seen them all the time I was over there. They were in different outfits.
Then what did you do once you got back home?
Well, I came straight back home, and oddly enough, at the time I went in the Army, I was working for the shoe factory. This is the shoe factory. This building right here we're in right now. And I came back up here within about a week after I got out. I was pretty nervous and I didn't want to lay around. I came back up here and applied for my job, and they gave it back to me. And from, I worked for 2 years, and then I went to work for Union Pacific Railroad. I finished 30 years with the railroad. So I went from a mess sergeant to a blacksmith. I finished up my career as a blacksmith. And by the way, I was in a CC camp before I ever went in the Army. A lot of us boys were whenever we were young. That's where I got drafted at Waynesville, Missouri, and whenever I turned 18.
Okay. Let's see, is there anything else? Any other little details you can think of?
Well, I don't know.
I'm kind of interested in the day-to-day life type of things that went on.
Well, you know, the infantry basic training that we took out in California, there's one little detail that before you can go overseas, you had to go through what they call an infiltration course. And this infiltration course is composed of a couple of machine guns firing over about 3 foot over your head while you crawl on your belly for 300 yards. And this had to be on your record before they would accept you into going overseas, because you had to know what it was like to be under fire. And you had when you crawled this 300 yards, you had to be able to fire that gun once you got out from under this machine gun fire, which most of them did, but a few of them wouldn't, because it was pretty sandy out there. And they had little bombs going off like you see on television to kind of encourage you to jump up, but you knew better than to do that. I never did hear of anybody ever jumping up and getting shot. And day-to-day life here in the States, we had a mess truck. We had 3 stoves on trucks, and these trucks, we could cook on them, believe it or not. And we made meals on the trucks on the road. And we rode the train from all the way across the country, and we cooked on the trains. Had meals on the trains. But it was a little sloppy. It was back in the old steam engine days, and they were pretty rough riding, but we managed.
So you're a mess sergeant pretty much throughout?
Well, I got into this by accident in a way. In the CC camp, I got laryngitis, and I lost my voice. So they put me in the dispensary and kept me about a week. And when I got out, they wouldn't put me back in the field, so they put me in the mess hall washing dishes. The next thing, somebody said, well, we need a cook. You like to do that? And I said, well, I don't care what I do. So I started in as a first cook. I mean, as a third cook, which makes salad. Second cook, make gravy, so I've done that. Then I went into sergeant, which was, they in the CC camp, they call him a leader. And so after that, well, I made mess sergeant. And at that time, you had 35 cents a meal that you had to feed these men. And they shipped whole sides of beef in, or whatever. You didn't get it pre-packaged or nothing. You had to do it, you had to cook it and all these kind of things, you know. You had to cut steaks and stew and whatever, you know, that you could make out of a side of beef. Well, whenever I got out of the CC camp, it wasn't long before I went in the Army. And I was out here in California, and I thought to myself, I said, I don't want to be a cook. I don't want to do this no more. I want to be a machine gunner. So I said, I just keep my mouth shut. I won't say nothing. So I was laying in the barracks one day, and when I had an extra lousy meal, you know, and I said, you know, I could cook better than that. And one of the guys looked at me and he said, what do you mean you can cook better than that? I said, oh, I had a little experience at CC camp. And he went and told the first sergeant. Guess where I ended up? I ended up cooking.